Uncle Satoru called 2 days later, sometime before noon. When I saw his number show up on my cell phone, I could already imagine what had happened. "Sorry to bother you at work," he said, in a low monotone as soon as I picked up. "There's a letter waiting for you when you come by the shop." So that's what happened. I let out a long sigh. I shouldn't have let her go off like that. Yet even if I had known that this was going to happen, what on earth could I have done? Momoko didn't play fair, I knew that. As I squeezed my cell phone in my hand, I could feel the anger welling up inside me. "Takako!" I hadn't said anything for so long that my uncle called out to me, starting to doubt I was still there. "I'm coming right over." "What about work?" my uncle was asking when I hung up. "It's not fair. It's not fair." I kept repeating the words over and over again in my head as the train carried me to Jimbocho. It's not fair. This isn't how adults act. I could understand some of what she was feeling. To be missing in action for 5 whole years, and then suddenly return only to say you're sick. I could see how you might hesitate to say something, but if she really still loved my uncle, then that was all the more reason to tell him. And what was going to happen to my uncle once she'd left him again? It had been hard enough for him the last time she left without saying anything. I was on my uncle's side, just as he had been on my side all this time, and that's why I couldn't forgive Momoko for disappearing again. The anger kept welling up inside me. I couldn't contain it. I was so angry. I was angrier than I'd ever been before. My body was trembling. When I got to the bookshop, my uncle showed me the note she'd left for me. It said, "Thank you. Please take care of yourself." I tore it into little pieces and let them fall on the floor. My uncle stared at me, dumbfounded. "It's not fair. It's cowardly. I can't believe her. She only showed me her good side and then she left. She just ran away." "Takako?" My uncle was peering at me with a look of concern. Taka..." I interrupted my uncle right there, and with my head held high, announced to the room, "I'm breaking my promise. Actually, it wasn't even a promise. She just told me not to say anything." "Huh?" My uncle sat there with his mouth hanging open as I told him the short version of what Momoko said to me that night. I was well aware, of course, that all this would come as a shock, but he had a right to know. And there was no one else who could stop Momoko. And yet my uncle didn't appear shocked. When I finished telling him, he just gave a little nod and said, "Okay." "You knew?" "Not at all." But then, my uncle sighed deeply and tried to sit down and almost fell into his chair. "I knew it would have taken something pretty significant for her to come back. Like I said before, once she makes a decision, she doesn't change her mind. So for her to show up again despite that, well, that's why I was afraid to ask too many questions. Which is why I asked you. How stupid am I? I never just talked to her directly, and this is the result," he said. He sounded like he had already given up. I got up close to him, looked him straight in the eye and said, "There's still time, but if you let her go now, you truly will never see her again. Even if you don't know how everything will turn out, you can't let her go. Do you understand what I mean? The only person who can stop her is you." "Okay." That was all he said. His voice lacked any conviction. "So hurry up and get going," I said, raising my voice. "Uncle, you remember when you told me not to run away from everything? It's just as bad if you and Momoko do it too. I'll watch the store, you go to her." "But I don't know where to find her." He still had a look in his eye like he felt powerless to stop her. "Nothing comes to mind? Someplace Momoko would think to go first?" I asked. He stared at me for a moment, looking dumbfounded. "Nope." "It can't be. There's got to be some place. Momoko's your wife." "That's true, but I'm telling you. Try thinking of a place that's special to her." My uncle stared at me blankly for a long while, then suddenly he said, "Oh, there is one place. Maybe, no, it's got to be there." "You've got it?" I asked again. "I do. I might just make it there in time," he said, nodding forcefully now. He almost flew out of his chair. "Takako, can I ask you for another favor?" "Sure. I'm not paying you for the hours, right? I know that, you idiot, I shouted. There was no time for this stupid routine. My uncle finally went running out of the store like I'd given him a kick in the pants. I hoped that he would be able to stop her this time. I stood in the doorway of the store and watched as my uncle bolted down Sakura Street. He seemed to get smaller and smaller as he ran. Unfortunately, because of his bad back, the scene was interrupted a few times by him stopping to thump his lower back, but that's how it goes, I guess. After my uncle disappeared from view, I stood for a while in a daze, looking up at the narrow band of sky visible through the gap between the buildings on the block. It was that same aqua blue autumn sky, with little dappled clouds drifting slowly across it like a school of fish. What happened? The store's open, right? A middle-aged man had stopped in front of the shop. He gave me a curious glance and then ducked inside. I followed him in. "Welcome to the Morisaki bookshop," I said. I'd played my part. Now the rest was up to my uncle. I sat down at my old spot at the counter and waited for Momoko and my uncle to return.